For now, though, we're joined by the first candidate on our election coverage, running in Washington's 6th district, Rebecca Parson. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Very glad to have you here. We're of course waiting for the results to start rolling in from your state. We've got a little bit longer before that happens, but it's a hell of a year to be a candidate as a Democrat. Inflation and high gas prices and COVID, and then there's the monkeypox. It's been pretty fraught. Yep. Tell me a little bit about this run.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting. I ran in 2020 and there was no real guide for how to run a congressional campaign during a pandemic. And now things are a bit more open, but now, like you said, we're just adding monkeypox on top of the existing pandemic and then the inflation that people are dealing with. And it's just, there are a lot of people who are getting more and more open to these ideas that I support, Medicare for all. I also support getting out federal inflation relief checks like we had during COVID. People are basically working a shift to just fill their tank to get to and from work. So it's really tough for people out there, and they really want these policies even more than they did before.
There's a lot of your policies that I want to talk about, but you mentioned the inflation relief checks. I could see that being wildly popular. I know, earlier in this period, Bernie Sanders had talked about doing like a clawback of the price gouging. In theory, that sort of thing could lead to these checks. How do you see it being funded, distributed, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I see it being funded by some of the stuff that Bernie Sanders and others have talked about, taxing the very wealthy, taxing corporations more, mandating that the IRS start going after the very wealthy. Right now, you're much more likely to get audited by the IRS if you're poor than if you're a billionaire. Price gouging as well, cracking down on price gouging. There are a lot of ways that we could raise the money, but we definitely need to get money out there to people because inflation being, over 9% now, and people's wages have not risen commensurate with that. I also am calling for a $30 minimum wage, and that got the attention the IR Fox News Newsback, so I've been on there defending it. But yeah, that's what we really need across the entire country. $30 per hour living wage is the floor for one adult to be able to support one child everywhere in the country. It's more even in expensive areas like where I live. So yeah, we need a lot of different things. Something else that could be done, for example, by executive order, which FDR did during World War II, is establish by executive action an Office of Price Administration and then institute nationwide price and rent caps. So there's a lot that could be done and just is not right now.
Yeah, so I actually, go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, yeah, I just real quick, I wanted, because I remember I was reading about your $30 minimum wage proposal, and you were talking about having it small businesses subsidized. So I was curious because I know people ask you about this all the time. A lot of the time when they do like inflation adjustments, they say like the minimum wage is at like $21, $22 today. So you briefly mentioned that $30 is basically the floor. So how do you justify $30 and how that would be subsidized? And then you mentioned like a Great Depression era national jobs program. What kinds of jobs you think we should have within that?
Yeah, well, the $21, $22 where it should be right now is, if it kept pace from where it was before, but that doesn't actually reflect what people need to survive. And I got my data from MIT. You can Google MIT living wage calculator, and it'll show you for every county in the country what the minimum living wage is, and it'll show you, one adult supporting one child, two adults, two kids, that kind of thing. And so, in terms of a pro-family perspective, we have one adult, one kid. This is what they need, the absolute floor. Every county, it could be in the Midwest, the Southwest, north, south. It's not just expensive areas like where I live on the West Coast. And so that's where I got the data, was that being the floor. And then the next argument sometimes people will say is, well, how are small businesses gonna afford that? You're just gonna put small businesses out of business. But what we have right now with our regulations is essentially, we are giving welfare to companies like Walmart and Amazon to pay their employees so little that we pick up the tab for their employees' food stamps and Medicaid. And Meanwhile, those companies are putting small businesses out of business. Why don't we let those big corporations that can afford it, they can pay the $30 minimum wage, but small businesses can start getting some of those subsidies that are currently going to billionaires and corporations in order so that those small businesses can pay their employees more. So a $30 minimum wage, it would help people be able to just afford the bare minimum, have a good quality of life. It would help business owners hire more employees and grow. It would be a huge boost to the economy. And then in terms of the Great Depression era National Jobs Program, what we need right now is to transition rapidly to away from fossil fuels and to renewable energy. And that's going to involve a lot of actual just the work of laying down cable, laying down pipe, maybe building high-speed rail. Like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to transition from our existing fossil fuel infrastructure to renewable infrastructure. And that's where a lot of those jobs would come from. And I'm talking about millions of jobs. And it's something that people talk about as part of the Green New Deal. It's why the green policies and labor go hand in hand, because transitioning will create millions of jobs.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that in your approach to growing new jobs and really seeing that as a response to inflation as well. I don't think that connection's often made. And also thank you for running again. Running once and then running twice, it's not easy to do. A lot of people, if they run and lose, it can be discouraging, but it's strategic to run multiple times. I mean, look at Cori Bush. Now we have another member of the squad who ran the first time and lost. And I'm curious, I see elections as power building moments for progressives, regardless of the outcome. You are talking to so many people, you're spreading so many ideas, and I'm sure you've learned a lot from the first run to this run. Your first run, super creative campaign. You were really powerful on social media. I'm curious, what you learned that first run that you applied in this run.
What I learned that first time was needing to use new ways of reaching people, especially online. So a lot of people who weren't that comfortable with, for example, Zoom and just a lot of stuff online, they became comfortable with it because they had to during the pandemic. So a lot more people are much more comfortable online now. And so that's a lot more people that we can reach. And so running a lot of online ads, texting people. Something I found with the last campaign is we couldn't go door to door during lockdown. So we made almost 1 million, it was over 950,000 phone calls. That's more voters, more people than are even in the district, because we were making so many phone calls. And it was great. We had a lot of really, really helpful conversations. We persuaded people to vote for me, but we also had a very low pickup rate. And my field director had never seen anything like it, just how low. People were just not answering their phone. And it's different from area to area. So maybe people here don't pick up their phone as much, but also I think a lot of people, they won't pick up a number. I don't pick up numbers I don't recognize. So it's like, okay, people are just not picking up their phone. So instead of hammering away at it and we're just a blunt force go through and keep trying this, why don't we just send people texts? They're more likely to actually get it, to read it. And if they're seeing the ads online, they're getting texts from us, be able to try to reach people in a lot of different ways, in the ways that they actually want to be reached.
Yeah. Like so helpful, obviously, the context that we're in is, it's not 2020 anymore, but it's not 2018. And so, you do have to adapt. And Jessica alluded to some of the creative ways that you've attempted to do that. So I had one more question. It's about, you did an ad that got a lot of pickup about occupying empty homes, sort of combining a couple of the different issues that America is facing, that you have, effectively very little housing supply. Housing price and rental prices have skyrocketed. You have an increasing number of unhoused people. And we're in the middle of a heat wave in many parts of the country. And by the time that goes away, we're gonna get hit by another terrible winter. We know how bad those have been in Texas recently. So tell me a little bit about the proposal that you were focusing on that ad.
Yeah, and that's the ad that got the attention of a lot of the right wing. And I think it's gotten, because of Fox, it got a lot of views, especially on YouTube, and they showed part of it on national TV. And the idea is that people say, especially the left, progressives, what are you gonna do when you get in as one person out of 435 people in the House? They're not gonna put you on powerful committees. You're only one, you'll be a freshman congressperson. What can you do? And I say, well, this, after I lost the last election, I focused on direct action, and we here in Tacoma, I co-founded a group that we occupied empty buildings to get more housing for homeless people, to get emergency pandemic housing, and we got 200 shelter beds added in the district. We rented some really huge rental trucks, and we went around and picked up trash from camps because the city was refusing to do it, and then we dumped it in front of City Hall, and lo and behold, within hours they were able to magically pick up the trash. And so what I found is that when you apply pressure creatively through direct action in ways that are very public, suddenly things that were impossible become possible. And so that's what I would like to do with this housing crisis we have. It's an affordable, available housing crisis. There are 28 empty homes for every homeless person in this country, including where I live. In every county in my district, there's over 10 homes per empty homes per homeless person. Over half of them are empty year round. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need to build. Definitely we do, but the fact remains that people are out there dying of exposure on the street while there are also empty homes. And so what I would like to do if I win is get in there and be able to call peaceful direct action, for example. Let's peacefully, occupy these empty corporate-owned homes across the country, turn them into housing, and actually use them what they're intended for. Instead of just being an empty profit-generating shell, be an actual home for a family. And like we did in Tacoma, nobody in our group went to jail. Nobody was charged with any crime. It was peaceful. When the police asked us to do something, we did it. So this kind of idea that Fox News was promulgating that I want to, bust into people's homes and kick them out, or I'm gonna snatch the remote away and be like, your TV's mine now. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about empty corporate-owned homes, that have been empty for a while, and moving people in and turning it into an actual home. And that could be part of a national jobs program as well. Why don't we have federal funding to give people jobs to rehab property and up the property value, use them for what they're actually intended for, turn all these empty units of housing into social housing that's owned by the public. I mean, there's so much that could be done.
Yeah, and it's not a part of even the conversation, basically. People know that there's a housing and a rental crisis, but they don't know how much of it is artificially generated by the corporations, some international, that buy up just massive amounts of houses and then just conveniently sit on them and trickle them out one at a time to keep the price high. It's very convenient, and I like that you're spotlighting that issue. But I know, Jessica, you had one more question?
Yeah, you're extremely effective at communicating the problems we're facing, and you're running on a platform that's progressive enough to actually, do something to move us towards addressing the problems. And you've run a grassroots campaign, so you've communicated this to many voters. And as much as I love reading all of the polls and consuming all of the data, I've really found that you can learn so much more about the country and how it's changing from just talking to people face to face. I'm curious, have you seen shifts in the conversations you had in 2020 versus now? A lot has changed in our country, and just like, what are you hearing on the doors? Has anything really struck you?
Yeah, actually, people who have been calling, reaching out, having conversations and saying, are you pro-choice? Because they have described themselves like, I am now a single issue voter and my issue is choice. And there are a lot of more voters who feel that way now. And so I've had people who say to me, okay, you're pro-choice. A woman has never represented this district. I like, the person I'm running against, a sitting Democrat, Derek Kilmer. People will say, I like him, I voted for him in the past, but with the attacks on women that we're seeing, with the attacks on gay people, I'm gay myself. I would be the first gay member of Congress from Washington State and the first woman from this district. I've had people just say to me, like Derek, I voted for him before, but I think that we need something different right now with the attacks that we're seeing on women and LGBT people. I think people are seeing the threat and how serious it is. It's just so much more stark now.
Yeah. Well, we're an hour and 10 minutes out for polls to close in your state, so it won't be too much longer before we'll be reporting on some of the early returns. Want to thank you for joining us and laying out so many important ideas. Really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.